For us, it's very much about taste, being culturally tuned in, knowing kind of the latest trends and cultural movements. And that's something I think brands don't get at every agency.
What do you think what will make brands feel relevant in the next 2 years?
It's very much about being fast and having a certain pace in adapting and understanding the market while still remaining authentic.
There is always this debate between taste and commerce. How do you find the balance between those two?
I think if you really plan for the long run and you try to build a brand that has a certain substance, you need to be disciplined because you can't engage in every opportunity that comes your way.
Welcome to another episode of The Future of Consumer Marketing by Global Talent. Today I'm joined by Simon Weisskopf, the VP of Brand and Commercial Development at Highsnobiety. Thank you so much for joining, Simon.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe you can start with, shortly introducing yourself and the company, because I think it's not that straightforward actually to figure out what you guys do at Highsnobiety.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. As you mentioned, I lead a team called Brand and Commercial Development at Highsnobiety. I've been with the company for 6 years. And we're really kind of an interesting company, which is a bit of a hybrid. We started in the publishing business. We have been doing that for 20 years. That's still very much our kind of core DNA. So we're really storytellers at heart. But since 2014, we also launched our own agency. And that agency is in the meantime around 120 people. So globally we're around 220 in total. And we produce content campaigns, do talent sourcing, and are really a full 360 agency for, I think, the world's most exciting brands. So everything from luxury to footwear to all kinds of industries.
Maybe you can show off a couple of names, because I think there's quite a lot to mention. Who's among your customers?
Yeah, we have a very broad customer base. So we very much started off in the footwear space. So from Nike to Puma to, you name it, New Balance. We work a lot with luxury clients as well, from Audemars Piguet to Gucci to I think every brand that works in the luxury space out there. But in the meantime, our brand portfolio has broadened quite a bit. So we also work with FMCG brands, we work with retail brands. We work with automotive brands, so every brand that's interested in cultural marketing and our specific consumer, which we call the cultural pioneer. And basically everything we do is centered around that target audience. As mentioned, we started off speaking to that audience on the editorial side, and now we also support brands in talking to that specific consumer cohort.
The automotive part was new to me. Maybe you can name a couple of brands there?
Sure, we work with Mercedes, BMW, Maserati. We worked with Ferrari in the past. So yeah, also there. I think every automotive brand that wants to speak to a culturally tuned in consumer has pretty much worked with us, either recently or in the past.
Really cool. And what do you think your clients are actually buying when they ask for services at Highsnobiety?
It's a good question. So there's things that we do very well and things that we don't do at all. So I think we're quite focused, as I mentioned, on that specific consumer, on the cultural pioneer, and there we can pretty much do everything. So we're very much a kind of holistic 360 agency in that space. So we definitely have a strong point of view. For us, it's very much about taste, being culturally tuned in, knowing kind of the latest trends and cultural movements. And that's something I think brands don't get at every agency. And we then pair it up with, I think, quite strong execution when it comes to production, and then our own reach and our own audience. So I think you always buy into the idea, the execution, and then also the audience and the reach, which for us is a very kind of holistic 360 package.
And speaking of trends and movements, how do you actually tell a difference between a hype and then a real shift in the consumer behavior?
Yeah, it's a good question. Of course, it's not easy to tell. sometimes. What's just a hype and what's there for good. Things really come in waves. Sometimes it's also interesting to jump on something that's more of a momental thing that doesn't, hold on for long. But if you're fast enough, you can really kind of catch that moment. And then there are big tectonic shifts, although also these move much faster these days. But I think the way we try to tell the difference is not by some specific playbook that we have, but it's very much the people who work at Highsnobiety who are very much culturally tuned in. So our strategists, our creatives, up to our CEO, very, very close to the market. They're very, very tuned in themselves. They're both consumers and producers in that in that space. So kind of catching what's next is really our mission, and we also cultivate that in a big way at Highsnobiety.
And how do you actually catch what's next? Like for me, I feel like going to exhibitions, newest exhibitions by modern artists would be like the way to figure out what's next, because I feel like artists are always a little bit anticipating the next like social trend or tendency. But how else? Share the secret.
I mean, art is definitely one angle, but I think there's 1,000 ways to get inspired. There's 1,000 ways to find these trends. I think we live in a society, in an ecosystem where things just very randomly sometimes pop up in places where you don't really expect them. Of course, we're super active on Instagram as a publisher, right? So for us, it's in our natural DNA to always ask ourselves, like, what's next, what's out there, what are consumers looking for. That comes very natural to us, because if you don't do that, you're not relevant as a publisher. So it also comes quite natural for us to translate that into a campaign, for example, or a strategy for a brand, because that's how we also operate in our media business. I would say now more so than ever, we are not only focused on the fashion space, we're very much focused on a wide range of different spaces, from like design to architecture to music. In the meantime, we're also more and more interested in sport. So I think it's quite a broad, set of sources where inspiration can come from, and where we can find these trends. Art being one of them. Yeah.
But that sounds kind of like magic. Is there also data underlying this whole process? Do you analyze maybe the behaviors of, Gen Z, for example, or how does it work?
I mean, we're doing a lot of research. We always have, especially starting in 2019. We there published our first white paper that was called The New Luxury. And that was a really pivotal moment for us, because we also realized that we can actually bring out research on the specific space that we're covering, and people are really picking up on it. So the term new luxury, we heard it over and over again, then from clients playing it back to us basically after we released that paper. So ever since, we heavily invested in that as well. We have a research partnership with the Boston Consulting Group, where we on a regular basis publish white papers. We also publish our own white papers, where we collect data. I wouldn't say on Gen Z consumers, because for us, and that has especially accelerated over the past couple of years, it's not about like talking to a specific demographic, but it's very much talking to a specific cohort of people. Again, we call them the cultural pioneer, that is very culturally tuned in. And these people can also be moms and dads. They can be young professionals as well as a Gen Z audience. So it's not necessarily defined by age or other demographic characteristics. It's very much defined by the mindset. And there we see that cohort is not only tuned in, but also very interested in brands. They're also an audience that's quite likely to purchase. So we see that they're 5 times as likely to purchase luxury items compared to a normal cohort, 4 times as likely to book luxury travel. So that is an audience that's very much worth influencing We sometimes have the term influence the influencer, and that's a bit how we think about our audience. So how can we actually speak to that early adopter, cultural pioneering audience in an authentic way? So you have that trickle down effect to later audiences in the funnel.
Maybe you could describe that persona within your audience. Maybe you already have some set ones, or maybe you have one, you can just improvise one on the spot.
Yeah, it's again, it's very hard to point a finger on that person, but I think we all know them in a certain sense. It's the kind of the cool kid from school, always the one who had the sneakers, 2 months earlier before everybody else had them. It's kind of your coolest friend bringing you to the coolest party. It's like very much an audience that is, as said, very tuned in into culture, really understands what's next, what's hot. It's often also people with substantially more own social media reach than a standard audience. So we did some research and we saw, I forgot the exact ratio, but I think it was around 2.5 times the Instagram reach or the social media reach that an average audience would have. So I think, again, these are, people worth trying to influence, trying to speak to, because they very much define what's cool with audiences that are a bit later maybe on this traditional product life cycle or audience life cycle that I think we all know from traditional marketing.
And whenever you have a new client on board, where do you actually start? I'm referring now to the agency part of the business. Are you actually involved in that?
I have been in the past. My team at the moment does not cover that much, but of course we always work with clients. Often also when we do branded Highsnobiety events. We just had a big event in St. Moritz together with the Kulm Hotel. Also there we brought some brands on board to activate with us on the ground with Audemars Piguet, with Maserati, with Odlo. So yes, I'm in touch with quite some brand partners as well.
But focusing more on the publishing side, as far as I understood.
Not necessarily. For us, it's often a bit of a hybrid because, of course, and maybe that's also a differentiating factor compared to other agencies. We do have a strong consumer brand, so brands also want to be associated with Highsnobiety. A lot of audiences, if they produce an event for a brand, it's a Coca-Cola event and not a Coca-Cola X agency event. For us, it's a bit different. A lot of brand partners want to be associated with our brand and with our audience. So for us, commercial and brand are very close together. That's also why we have that team called Brand and Commercial Development Team, which is kind of a hybrid between a business development team and a brand team for the Highsnobiety brand.
Can you maybe describe your team and the people you work with? How do you actually select those people? I can also imagine it's a very selective casting, let's put it this way.
Yes, 100%. I think the people are everything for us, to find the right people who kind of represent our DNA, our mindset, and the way we want to be perceived in the market as well. As I said before, I think for us, the people who work at Highsnob are also consumers of Highsnob. So it's always a bit, it's for a lot of people, it's more than just a job. They're just big fans of the brand. They very much identify themselves also with Highsnobiety and what we stand for as a brand, the content we produce, the people we cover, the talent we work with. So for us, it's extremely important to have that cultural fit. It's, I wouldn't say it's everything, but it's a lot. So I guess a lot of brands say, well, you need to fit into the company culture. But for us, culture is much more than only, I don't know, some rules of engagement between colleagues. Culture is really at the heart of what we do.
I feel like it's the moment when, sometimes corporates try to sort of invent that culture. In your case, it's almost like a force of nature, just being there, and then you have to somehow relate to it.
100%. And our founder, David, also bootstrapped the company, I think, until 2015 or 16. He started in 2004. So, or 5, you know it better than I do. You can just tell, you can really tell. And although we sold the company to Zalando, he really shows up every day. He's still like also involved in a lot of like details, because it's also about the detail in the end, and that really trickles down also through the organization. Yeah.
Do you think the brand also reflects his identity a lot?
Yeah, in a certain way, it does. He's just still to this day like a big fan of product, a big fan of brands, a big fan of craftsmanship, a big fan of culture at large, and he like lives and breathes that, and you can feel it, and I think that's also very inspiring for the people working at Highsnob.
What do you think is your current mission right now? What are you trying to focus on, or what are you trying to push for?
So I think we really want to double down on our DNA as storytellers. We have decided to exit our commerce business in fall this year. And now we're really focusing on that kind of core skill that we have to tell great stories and to connect the dots and understand what's next. And it feels now more than ever we're very much kind of acting as one unit across editorial, our HS Plus teams. So HS Plus is the name of our agency, and the rest of the organization. That's not always easy, especially as we operate across 7 offices. We have a big team in New York, we have a team in LA, Amsterdam, London, Milan, now also Paris, and then the headquarter in Berlin. But it feels that we're very much kind of all marching in one direction at the moment, which is great, and it also really shows in the results.
Earlier, you spoke about the new luxury as a concept. How do you define it?
The new luxury was defined, I think it was 2019. And back then, there was this huge convergence between streetwear and traditional luxury. You know, if I would have told you 2010 that Supreme would collaborate with Louis Vuitton, you would be like, okay, like these brands don't go together, you know. And then suddenly that trend started. And David has been covering that for a long time. So while this convergence kind of happened, he was very much kind of the authority on that, and it became kind of from a niche trend, it became a bit of a mega trend within the industry. We saw then a lot of collaborations, and then suddenly it started to get a bit more murky in a certain sense. What's actually a luxury good? You know, if you ask a younger consumer, if you would ask them, is a rare Jordan sneaker a luxury good? They would probably say yes, and that was unthinkable before, I don't know, the 2019s or 2020. So it really mixed things up a bit in terms of what's considered luxury. And that's, I think, the new luxury, that these boundaries are kind of dissolved. And suddenly new players kind of enter the luxury market, as said, like a Jordan with a rare Jordan sneaker that you would just haven't put on the same map as a luxury brand before.
What are actually your favorite brands, or let's say new kids on the block?
That's very hard to tell, to be honest. There's so much good stuff out there. Things move at such a rapid pace. I'm a big fan of a kind of guys. It's a brand from Munich, from Germany. I really love their craftsmanship, but I'm also like a sucker for a good pair of New Balance. So I think it's really a broad set, and it's also not only fashion. We just released our latest report on the status economy, and we can see more and more that brands and also status is more and more defined not only by what you wear, but what you drink, what you eat, where you travel, and so on. So we see so many exciting brands popping up in all different kinds of spaces, also outside of the fashion space. So it's very hard to keep track of all the excitement that's going on in the market.
And what do you think, what will make brands feel relevant in the next few years, let's say?
I can tell you what I feel would make a brand relevant, if that helps. I think in the end, it's very much about being fast and having a certain pace in adapting and understanding the market while still remaining authentic. Mm-hmm. And that's not easy, because brands are getting pulled in all different kinds of directions. They have to read signals very fast, and they have to pretty much decide ad hoc, like which things are we jumping onto and which do we ignore. And I think that brands that have a very strong strategy and identity are just much quicker to decide where to engage and where not to engage. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what sets the good brands apart from the not so good brands, that they're not being torn in all directions, but they kind of know what they want. And it's a bit, I think also in personal life, if you know what you want, it's much easier to decide whether or not you want to pursue a certain opportunity or not. So I think having a very clear idea on where you want to head to, and always reminding people also of what the mission is and where you come from and what authenticity means for your brand and your product, I think really helps to navigate this super fast-paced environment. Because, as said, culture can come from every angle. So you have to be super alert, super aware, read the signals early, and take fast decisions. Because if you snooze too much, it's difficult to keep up.
Speaking of, having the strategy set and knowing where to go, where to engage, where not to engage, I assume, you have to have your values defined. What are Highsnobiety's values?
It's a good question. We don't have a fixed set of values. I mean, at least not an external one. Our mission has always been, we are what's next. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very much what we strive to do. Underlying that are a couple of things that I think come very natural to us. Really working and acting as a team, a certain honesty and transparency within the organization, and also having a very kind of respectful way that we treat our colleagues, our clients, and culture at large, our collaborators. So it's not only about brands, it's, we collaborate with so many people, with talent, musicians, club owners, whatever, like we do so much of that. And I think that comes very natural to us. But I think where we really differentiate is by really trying to living up to that mission of knowing what's next, and always being on the hunt for what's to come.
Yeah, when you were describing a brand that sort of sticks to their kind of DNA and does not engage, where it's kind of very tempting to engage to and still they choose not to, I thought of The Row, mm-hmm. the brand founded by the Olsen sisters. But I'm also thinking about how they're, for example, not capitalizing as much as they could, let's say, right? By not going, like, let's say, but by not selling the company, let's say. And I imagine that a lot of your clients have sort of a similar debate. There is always this debate between taste and commerce, right? It's almost like at least this is how I see it. Maybe you would disagree, but how do you find the balance between those two aspects? And because I obviously assume that customers are not coming to you asking how can we make more money, but how can we be authentic? But still, there should be a balance of those.
Yeah, I mean, The Row is of course a fantastic example of a brand that has done it right, and they're so successful, although they're very silent in a way, and not very loud in how they communicate. Also, when you look at their Instagram, it's very few products actually that are being displayed, but it's very much about the mood, the emotions of the brand. Like what is it about? How do you want to feel if you wear a piece of The Row? That's a strategy, I think, that it's actually twofold, right? I would say one thing is like your planning horizon. I think if you really plan for the long run and you try to build a brand that has a certain substance to it and doesn't just evaporate after a big buzz, you need to be disciplined. And as I mentioned, you need to be authentic. And that also means being disciplined, right? Because you can't engage in every opportunity that comes your way. And I think it always pays off in the long run. And you see it with just brands that have been there for such a long time, doing their thing and really staying true to themselves. They also build a really loyal audience. They build a real tribe. It means something to wear their product, and that also makes people pay a premium for a product in the long run. That's one part of the answer. And then the second part is there's, for example, if you look at a brand like, I don't know, Nike, or another big commercial brand, there's always a tiering of product as well, right? So you have certain product that's very, very pure play, that really represents your brand. That's the product you talk the most about, but I guess it's not the product that moves the needle the most commercially in terms of direct impact. And then there's other product that, might be a bit diluted or not that exciting, but you just push a lot of volume of that of that product. And in the end, I think it's always a balance, especially for big brands, which have to serve both kind of a cultural audience, but then also a mass market. That's maybe not a problem that the Row has, but of course, bigger brands do have that problem. It's then also about the product mix and how you communicate to your specific subset of audience in an authentic way.
I think naming Nike as a paragon is really good example. I used to translate their marketing campaigns for another market. So I read a lot of their brand manuals, and I think they really do it. They get this exactly right. Simon, you've been at Highsnobiety for 6 years. What have you learned personally, and how has your journey been going?
Wow, I learned a lot.
I can see.
Over the last 6 years, I mean, I came more from the corporate world. I used to work at Axel Springer. I was a director at investment management there. It's not like a huge corporate, but it's, I think, 16,000 employees. At least it was at the time. And I think what really changed for me when I joined Highsnobiety is that, in a corporate world, kind of, you get punished if something fails. Like in this more like smaller, more agile world, you get punished for not trying in a certain sense. So it's very much about being out there, looking for opportunities, trying to, always assess like where could we go next, and where can we leverage our brand in a kind of a unique way that differentiates us from our competitors. So I think that has really also taken me some time coming from the corporate world. After I needed a couple of months to kind of readjust and get into that mindset. But ever since, it has been an amazing journey and a very fun place to work at, both for the topics that we work on, the clients that we're allowed to work with. It's also a real privilege to work with these brands. But then first and foremost, also the people who are there, which I was allowed to learn a lot from, because I have more of a finance business background. And of course, at Highsnobiety, we have very interdisciplinary teams. So from product designers to creatives to people doing production, doing talent sourcing, and with every interaction and every joint project, you can just learn a lot and really broaden your skill set. So so far that has been a fantastic journey. And something that also, to be honest, it's sometimes it really doesn't feel like work, because it's so close to what I'm also interested personally. I think sometimes my email inbox is covering the same topics as my Instagram feed, so it's very, very, very close to also my personal interests. So that has been great.
All right, Simon, thank you so much for coming and sharing the insights. It has been really a pleasure.
Thank you for your time.